In the spring of 1982, when the snows around the industrial city of Kirov were beginning to melt into slush and the streets smelled faintly of thawing earth and diesel fumes, a 16-year-old boy named Mikhail Antonovich Sokolov pedaled his old bicycle past the chain-link fence of military facility number 47. He rode that route every day on his way home from school. The fence, topped with 3 rows of barbed wire, cut a long shadow across the road, and everyone in the neighborhood knew to keep their distance. Signs posted every 50 meters said, "No photography, no stopping, do not approach fence." It was a familiar part of the landscape, a fixture in the geography of his childhood, as normal to him as the gray apartment blocks, the grocery queues, and the rickety wooden bridge over the Bystritsa River. But on that day, something unusual caught his eye. Through the fence, perhaps 30 or 40 meters inside the perimeter, a strange angular structure rose above the usual warehouses and loading platforms. A tall, skeletal tower of metal beams and antenna panels, new and out of place, surrounded by scaffolding and a small cluster of engineers in uniform. Mikhail had never seen it before. The teenage mind, particularly one raised in the monotonous rhythm of Soviet provincial life, has a way of seizing on anything unusual with fierce curiosity. That day, as he slowed his bicycle, he stared at the structure with the kind of fascination that school books could never evoke. It looked like some enormous metallic insect, its arms angled toward the sky. He didn't know that the structure was part of a new, classified radar prototype linked to missile early warning systems. He didn't know that the facility, usually quiet, was undergoing a secret expansion. All he knew was that it was new, it was mysterious, and that was enough to make him curious. He rode home with the image fixed in his mind. When he walked into the small apartment he shared with his mother, he could still picture the strange metal silhouette. His mother was already preparing dinner: cabbage soup, a loaf of black bread, a handful of potatoes. The television in the corner of the living room played a dull monologue from a party official about productivity targets in agriculture. It was standard noise in Soviet homes, a kind of ideological wallpaper. Mikhail dropped his school bag and told his mother, "Mama, they're building something new at the base." She barely looked up from the stove. "Don't talk about that. It's not our concern." This was the kind of answer he expected, but not the kind he wanted. The curiosity gnawed at him. That night, lying in his cot beside the window that looked out on the courtyard, he imagined what the tower might be. Some kind of communications antenna, a weather monitoring station, a secret weapon? His textbooks said nothing, because they were not meant to. His teachers spoke in rigid euphemisms. The newspapers were silent. In a world where information was a precious, controlled commodity, imagination was the only free space he had. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning when the city was still sleepy and the factory whistles had not yet sounded, Mikhail took his bicycle and a small film camera from a drawer in his desk, a camera made in East Germany, a birthday gift from his uncle. It was old, a bit scratched, the film counter often stuck halfway, but it worked well enough for the rolls of expired film he bought at flea markets. He rode back toward the base. The road was quiet, only an elderly woman pulling a sled with firewood and a few workers heading toward the tram stop. Mikhail stopped his bicycle at the far edge of the road, pretending to check his chain. His eyes kept drifting to the tower inside the fence. The structure still fascinated him. He thought, one photo, just one. No one will know. And in that naive thought lay the seed of a disaster.
He raised his camera, keeping the movement minimal, and snapped a single photograph through a gap in the chain-link pattern. The camera clicked faintly. No alarms went off. No soldiers appeared. No spotlights turned toward him. The world continued as before. He pedaled away, relieved and excited. The act felt like solving a small private puzzle. an indulgence in curiosity without any real consequence. In reality, the consequence had already begun. Unbeknownst to him, a guard stationed near the southwestern watchtower had seen a glint, the brief reflection of sunlight off the lens. The guard noted it in the shift log and mentioned it to the deputy commander. The deputy, following protocol, ordered that the perimeter patrol be increased and that the report be forwarded to the KGB liaison assigned to the facility. It was a minor note in a thick folder of reports, but in a security system built on vigilance and suspicion, even a glint could trigger inquiry. Meanwhile, Mikhail continued his life as though nothing had happened. He went to school, struggled through mathematics, doodled tanks in his notebooks during literature class, traded stamps with his friend Yuri, and waited for the film to be developed. It was the film that would betray him. He had a habit of sending his rolls to a small photography kiosk near the central post office. The kiosk was run by an elderly man named Semyon, who developed film in the back room using old chemicals and equipment that dated back to the 1960s. The process was slow, and customers often waited a week or two. When Mikhail submitted the film, he did not think twice. The photograph of the secret radar structure was just one frame among shots of a stray dog, the river at sunset, and an abandoned factory chimney. It didn't stand out in his mind as anything significant, only as something interesting. A week later, on a gray Monday, when drizzle clung to the windows and the city seemed half asleep, the kiosk owner opened the film roll to check the quality of the prints. When he reached the frame of the fenced military structure, he paused. He squinted, adjusted his glasses, and frowned. Photography kiosks in the Soviet Union operated under strict informal regulations. If any suspicious image appeared, anything involving military equipment, maps, bridges, or government buildings, the kiosk owner was expected to report it. Failure to do so could result in the loss of the kiosk, an interrogation, or worse. Semyon had lived through enough decades of shifting rules to know when to stay cautious. He placed the photograph aside and made a note to contact the local militia office. By the following morning, the photograph was in the hands of a KGB officer assigned to monitor civilian communications. He examined it under a lamp, magnifying glass in hand. The angle, though crude, clearly showed the new radar array, a structure that was classified and whose construction had not yet been acknowledged even within most branches of the military. The officer's heart sank. A leak had occurred. Even worse, the leak could have begun with a civilian teenager. Inside the facility, a parallel investigation was already underway. Security logs had been reviewed. The guard's report of a glint was matched to the approximate place where the photograph had been taken. The timeline aligned. The KGB liaison, Lieutenant Colonel Sherbakov, ordered a discreet inquiry into local schoolboys who were known to be curious or had been seen near the area. The kiosk owner, questioned under subtle pressure, provided the name: Mikhail Antonovich Sokolov, student, age 16. The knock on the Sokolov apartment door came 3 days later at 6:20 in the morning. The sky was still dark, and the city was just waking up. Mikhail was eating black bread with jam when the sound rang through the flat. His mother looked startled. No one visited at that hour. When she opened the door, 2 men in plain coats and 1 uniformed militia officer stood in the cramped hallway. "Is your son home?" the taller man asked quietly. Mikhail felt his stomach clench. There was something in the man's voice that suggested this was no ordinary visit.
They asked him simple questions at first. Do you take photographs often? Do you own a camera? What routes do you ride your bicycle along? Have you ever taken photographs near the military facility? The questions were asked gently, almost politely, but they were relentless. Mikhail tried to answer truthfully, stumbling over his words. Eventually, under the weight of their gaze, he admitted he had taken a photograph of a strange tower out of curiosity. In that moment, the room seemed to freeze. His mother gripped the back of a chair. The officers exchanged glances. They did not arrest him. He was too young, and the goal was containment, not punishment. But they confiscated his camera, took the negatives, and told him he would be summoned for further questioning. His mother stood silently as they left, her face pale, her hands trembling. The investigation escalated rapidly. In Moscow, high-ranking officials were informed. The new radar system had been part of a classified defense initiative, and the fact that a civilian child had photographed it before completion was an institutional embarrassment. Questions were raised about security protocols, guard rotations, and civilian oversight of photography kiosks. A minor incident was becoming a scandal inside the state apparatus. Then came the worst development. One of the film kiosk employees, a young man named Arkady, had made an illicit copy of the image before surrendering the original. He was not a spy nor an ideologue. He was simply fascinated by unusual images. He had kept the copy as a curiosity, but during a night of heavy drinking, he showed the photograph to a cousin who worked at a factory connected to communications equipment. That cousin, in turn, boasted about it at a workers' dormitory gathering. Within a week, the rumor of a strange new military device being built in Kirov had spread among dozens of workers. Rumors in the Soviet Union were a kind of underground language, a whisper network that traveled faster than newspapers. When rumors involved military matters, they drew attention from foreign intelligence like sparks drawing dry tinder. Within 2 months, a Western radio broadcast, monitored by Soviet authorities, mentioned an unconfirmed installation of a new phased radar array in the Kirov region. The wording was cautious but unmistakable. Panic spread among security officials. A classified project had been indirectly referenced on foreign airways. Someone in the system had leaked a secret, and at the origin of the chain, completely unaware of the storm he had unleashed, stood a 16-year-old boy with an old camera. The next round of questioning was far more serious. Mikhail was brought to a district office and escorted to a room with gray walls and a metal table. The officers were polite, never raising their voices, but their questions were sharp, precise, extended over hours. They asked him to recreate the path he had taken, the moment he took the photo, the reason he had done it. They asked about friends, teachers, neighbors, anyone who might have encouraged him. He repeated, trembling, that it had been curiosity, only curiosity. His youth saved him. Investigators concluded he had acted without malicious intent. He was labeled careless, impulsive, ideologically naive. But the machinery of state discipline needed an example. A formal reprimand was issued to his school. He was placed on an informal watch list, meaning his activities would be monitored. His mother was warned to educate him about the importance of information hygiene. The kiosk owner was interrogated, disciplined, and stripped of his license. The employee who had duplicated the photo, Arkady, was arrested and sentenced to a term in a labor colony for spreading sensitive material. His cousin was fired and placed under surveillance. And the military facility tightened its security protocols for the next decade. Mikhail's life, too, changed in ways he could not fully understand. His teachers watched him with thinly veiled suspicion. Neighbors, having heard whispers, treated him differently. Some whispered that he must have been involved with foreigners. Others warned their children to stay away from him. He began to withdraw, becoming quieter, more cautious.
the weight of the incident pressing on him like a leaden coat. Years later, long after the Soviet Union dissolved and the archives began to open, the case would be reviewed by historians. They would marvel at how a single photograph taken out of adolescent curiosity had rippled through the rigid structures of a secretive state, exposing weaknesses in its security apparatus and sparking internal panic. But at the time, to the teenager who took the picture, it was simply a moment of wonder, a glimpse at something mysterious in a world that seldom allowed mystery. The tragedy of the story is not simply that a boy caused a scandal. The tragedy lies in how his system, designed to protect itself, could be shaken by the smallest act of human curiosity, and in how that system, in defending itself, left scars on those who had never intended harm. Curiosity had become danger. Innocence had become suspicion. And a single photograph taken by a boy on a bicycle had shown how fragile even the most powerful institutions could be when confronted by the unpredictable imagination of youth. In the Cold War, secrets did not always fall into enemy hands through spies, traitors, or double agents. Sometimes they slipped through a gap in a fence, caught the eye of a teenager passing on his bicycle, and spread through the world like a rumor carried by the wind, unstoppable, untraceable, and born from nothing more than a harmless human desire to understand what lies on the other side of a locked door.